topic, this I-9 topic is immediate importance. And possibly, I have seen many not companies, but many HR people come out of this 2-week period and they'll report back to me that we found errors, we found missing I-9 forms, and really can be a situation where you can save your company anywhere from $10,000 to $60,000. So a couple of examples there. A small trucking company. This trucking company was in Salt Lake City, and their I-9 records were just horrible. And they had, like I said, the previous HR manager was just very poor in keeping up with the documents, and I don't think he was ever instructed on how to fill them out in the first place. So they had just a huge amount of missing documents, and the ones that were in there were filled out improperly, and things were inverted in the wrong place, or they didn't get all the information. And that company ended up paying ended up paying a $65,000 fine because of it was just in shambles. The whole I-9 process was in shambles. Also, if you read back a little over 10 years ago, in Salt Lake City is a hotel, a very famous hotel downtown. It's the Grand America Hotel. And they were audited. They received an audit from the federal government, and Homeland Security came in. They did one of those desk review audits, and they found out, especially with their housekeeping and their employees, they found multiple numbers. And I'm going off the top of my head here, but I want to say 30, 40, 50 people working for the hotel who were not authorized to work in the U.S. And they at the time, there was a lot of infractions, and the federal government says you got to do this, this, and this, and they ended up fining them. I think it was $12,500. The federal government came back in about 18 months, and they did another live audit, and they were walking the hallways of the hotel, and they started seeing all these people that they had seen last time who were not authorized to work in the U.S. And it initiated a full follow-up audit. What the Grand America Hotel, they had created a separate kind of shadow company under a separate umbrella to rehire all these housekeepers and put them back to work. And the federal government looked at this like, okay, you are just giving us the finger and you are just going to do your own thing. And they were fined $1.1 million. And again, they had to terminate those people. So yeah, the federal government will crack down if things are coming your way, or if yeah, it's never a good idea to try to deceive the federal government. So some lessons learned. So yeah, we touched on this, whether they're electronic or hard copy. Just chime in. When was your last I-9 self audit, or have you done an I-9 self audit? Chalice, what about you? Have you done an internal audit to take a look at those?
Not that I'm aware of recently. I am still newer to my role, but it's definitely
Gotcha.
something I'm going to follow up on.
Okay, good, good. Anna, do you know if if the I-9s have been audited at all?
No, never.
My guess
But
would be
that's
no.
no.
There's been no one prior to you, that really no one there. I think they
Yeah.
had an intern there for a while, but there's been no one there with true HR skills.
Yeah, I looked through some of them last week and yeah,
Okay, you might save your firm, $200,000. So this will be good.
hopefully.
Yeah. Um, but that's my advice is to do one of those self audits every 5 to 6 years. Because if Department of Homeland Security comes in and they say, oh, you know what, it looks like Producers Livestock has really taken attention to this, and they've looked at the I-9 forms, and they're making an effort, and they're a good faith effort to keep these in compliant. Has anybody on the call been through a federal audit, a formal federal I-9 audit? Anna, you're shaking yes?
Yeah, my last company was.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, or
It was a little scary. I mean, they were all done electronically, but still, we were definitely after that much more aware of
Yeah.
making sure they were done before their start dates. But yeah, it was not fun.
Did they assess any fines or anything?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No worries. No worries. Okay. We're going to talk about all of that today. And also remember that the I-9 form, if you are still using paper forms, the I-9 form was updated in November of 2023. So it's maybe 14 months ago, 15 months ago that it was updated. That's the form we should be using. So if we're hiring someone new today or tomorrow, we should use that November 2023 form. That was the updated one. It was funny. Prior to that, we were using an older form, and the federal government failed to update that form. So everybody, for about 6 to 9 months there was a period in 2023 where there was no updated form, and it looked like you were filling out an expired form, but they hadn't updated it yet. So we follow their rules, and they don't necessarily follow common sense. So keep that in mind. So this I-9 process, remember this process, I did have a small contractor. He was new. His company had only been around for about 18 months, and he calls me in a panic, and he said, there's someone at one of my job sites. The owner calls me, and they're talking to my foreman, and he thought it was he thought it was ICE or something like coming in, immigration coming in. He didn't know, but it was DOPL, DOPL. It was the Department of Professional Licensing. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, really what that person's looking for is your contractor's license and your business license. I said, you're in the office, take a picture of those two and send them to your foreman. And that's what he did. And the foreman like turned his phone around and said, here's our business license, here's our professional license through the state. And the guy was like, good, you're all taken care of. And I said, well, I'm glad it wasn't the Department of Homeland Security or Immigration and Customs. I said, if that were the case, they'd probably be heading to your office very soon to do a full I-9 audit, and they would look at your I-9 forms. And he says to me, what's an I-9 form? He had this new company and 18 employees. And so we set him straight. We went out there and got him all set up on I-9 forms, but he just didn't know what he didn't know. And as a new business owner, he had skipped that very important step. The I-9 process provides and proves two things. It proves the person's identity, and it proves their right to work in the U.S. So question, does a person need to be a U.S. citizen to work in the U.S.? Yes or no?
No.
Yeah, the answer is no. The answer is no. They can have either visa status or a green card or some type of work status where they can work in the US and they can be a citizen of another country. But they still have to provide that documentation of work status and identification. There's a time window. How soon, if we hire somebody, how soon do we have to complete this I-9 form?
3 days from the day they start.
Yeah, 3 days, and it's 3 working days. So if they start on a Friday, we're going to be able to get Monday and Tuesday in there, 3 working days. Also, it's important, and I know sometimes this is news to HR people, but the files should be maintained separately. Now, if the files are electronic files, well, by virtue of the process, those I-9s are just they can be pulled from the data, and they're kind of in a separate folder. So that qualifies as being filed separately. The data is pulled separately.
When you say, sorry to interrupt
no,
you, but
jump in anytime.
when you say electronically, is that when you go through the E-Verify process? Is that
No.
what you mean by electronically?
No.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is, like somebody said earlier, they're on Rippling. And that's a HR software program, and that keeps all the data of all your employees. But in Rippling, as you hire a new employee, they'll go in and the employee will fill out part of this electronic copy of the I-9 form. You'll see the I-9 form, and they fill out the open cells in there, and they'll put their name and address and contact information. And then the HR person will go in and verify the documents. So then it becomes, what happens at the end, you have an electronic I-9 form. Otherwise, it can, now the E-Verify process is done electronically, but that's a separate step, and we'll talk about that. Otherwise, if you don't have a software like Rippling or ADP or some of those software systems, you are doing it on a paper copy, and that's your record. And also, those paper copies should be kept in a separate file. So you're going to have an HR file and folder for all of your employees, and you're going to have a separate file or folder, and this could be in filing cabinets that are right next to each other. That the one filing cabinet could have all your HR files. The second filing cabinet would house all of your I-9 forms. And with those I-9 forms, I like to keep two sets of the, not two sets, two categories of those. So I'll take all my active employees, and maybe I am, yeah, maybe it's Harvest Right. So I've got 250, Anna's got 250 active employees. So in that part of the file, Anna has 200, and it should match out exactly to your number of employees. Anna has 250 I-9 forms. Now, also, many I-9, well, I-9 forms must be maintained following the dates of employment. So you'll have active employees and inactive employees or termed employees. We'll talk about that as we get to it. So you'll have two separate files in there. The federal government wants them in a separate file so they can conduct their audits in a quick and efficient manner. Okay. We're going to talk about two different things here. In the process of this, there's two ways that the federal government comes in and will audit a business. Now, these happen in the forms of audits or raids. And what you're hearing about on the news is raids that are happening. Now, I haven't seen a lot of them happening yet in places of business. I'm seeing them go after people just in their normal lives. They'll be pre-dawn, they often call them pre-dawn raids, and they'll be there early at where the person lives or where the person works. With the pre-dawn raid, the federal government is in charge, and the police or the ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They show up and they've got their black or dark or navy jackets, and they will shut down operations, and they will hold you and your employees in place until they can go through and verify documentation from employees or from citizens. So those raids are very different. And I believe we'll see a shift. Here we are in the first quarter of the year, January, February, March. I think we'll continue to see a focus on these raids. And then I think we'll see a shift later this year where they really increase the audits. I think they have everybody in immigration and homeland security working on the raid side of this equation. I haven't talked to any clients lately or during the past 30 to 60 days who are getting hit by these homeland security audits that are more of the desk audits where they're looking at the paperwork. So these raids are what we need to be aware of. And I pulled some information off the internet this morning. Here are the number of arrests that they are making on a daily basis. So it's huge numbers, and the numbers are getting bigger. But these are nationwide numbers over the past week plus. And it's happening quickly. And some of the January 27th was almost 1,200 individuals, and they're for the most part, they're arresting these people and deporting them. So how do we prepare? We're in HR. How do we protect our companies and prepare for our focus now, but as opposed to our focus in Q2 and Q3, Q4 of this year as we move forward? We'll talk today about reviewing your I-9 verification process. And for a lot of us, that falls on our shoulders. We're the ones who, we either know where the form is or we know where the electronic version is, and we introduce this new employment candidate into the process. It already sounds like some of you, and probably many of you, are using the E-Verify process. And that's interesting. That E-Verify process there's states like Florida that require it 100%. You have to do it in Florida. Other states are, they require it or they highly recommend it with no teeth. What I mean by that is there's not an audit process for E-Verify. If you're not using E-Verify today, they won't come in and fine you for anything. You say, we haven't gotten around to that yet, and there's no fine in the process. They might put some teeth in that prior to the end of the year. We'll watch that and see what they're doing. Now might be a good time over the next 90 days to say, okay, we are March 1st for our company. We're going to start the E-Verify process, and you can start that up just through HR or your payroll manager and have them own that process. Third comment on here, my thoughts coming out today: will deportation impact us and impact our employees? It causes us as HR people that we need to look at our competence in the status of your employees, because we're not required to be experts in documents, but you probably have a gut feel. And do we come across fake documents or borrowed social security numbers and cards and fake? Yeah, we do. It just happens in the process. And we look at it, looks legit, and it passes through E-Verify, and we move it on. So there's an organization called the National Law Review, and they have said that over the past 5 years, there are sectors where Department of Homeland Security will focus on these sectors, and these are probably the most likely to have these ICE agents come in and shut down, have one of these pre-dawn raids. So that includes manufacturing, assembly, restaurants and hospitality, and construction. So those are the I would think in Q2, Q3, Q4 that there's going to be a higher emphasis and probably more auditors and more pre-dawn raids in those areas. Will we see changes over time? The brand new ICE director at the national level, his name is Thomas Homan, and he has said, he's come right out and said there will be more work site enforcement. So that means, to me, that NOI, notice of inspection letters will be going out. I think we'll see updates to the I-9 process, maybe updates to the I-9 form, and updates and requirements on the E-Verify side. And like I said before, I think we'll see increased audits, increased desk reviews. So like I said, let's make sure we're using that new I-9 form electronically or hard copy. The one that's dated, it should have that, I think, November 1st, 2023 date is the current one that we're on. I don't believe it's been updated since then, and correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes they'll update things and I miss them, but I don't think I've missed that. So some of the updates that happened, now 2023, we were coming and kind of emerging from the pandemic, and there were changes made. So the new form, sections 1 and 2, which it used to be a two-sided form or a two-page form, sections 1 and 2 are just on the one sheet. And the translation and recertification forms or sections, those used to be part of the main document. They've moved that to a different section, which I like, because translation and recertification, it's probably less than 1% of your I-9 forms are going to go through a translation or recertification process. And acceptable receipts are added to, you can add those to the documents. What that means is somebody comes in to work for you and they have a driver's license and they thought they had their social security card and they can't find it. They've lost it. So they can, in that 72-hour period, they can go down to the Social Security office and say, I lost mine. Can you get me a new Social Security card? Well, that takes some time and that could take weeks. But in the meantime, the Social Security office will give them an official receipt that says they've gone down to get that Social Security card if they don't have an equivalent document. And then you can, then there's a time period where, and I think it's 90 days where they can come back and bring you the actual social security card and you can update the document. Also, there's a new checkbox on this form for remote processing. Does anybody on this call hire people remotely, out of city or out of state? Angie, you do? Okay, anybody else?
Yes,
There
we do sometimes.
Okay, you guys do? Okay. Remember, on those hires, you have to check that box on the form electronically or hard copy. And there are some requirements. I've got a separate slide on what you have to do for that remote hiring, and here it is. This has only been allowed this happened during the pandemic, and then they solidified the process as the new form came out in November of 2023. If you are doing remote hiring, because you are not looking and touching the driver's license or the social security card or the passport or those documents, yeah, we're looking at them and we're seeing them through typically a high quality video. You know, people, we can FaceTime somebody, or we can hold up our camera to our phone to the camera, and we can share information that way. But if you're doing remote hiring and you're not touching those documents, you have to use E-Verify. So that's an update. If you're hiring people out of state, then you have and you need to put that E-Verify number on the I-9 form. That can be an infraction. And some bad news about that, you can't go back. If you hired somebody 3-4 months ago, you can't go back and do E-Verify now. It needs to be done at the time of hire. It's not allowable. So if you haven't done that in the past, then I would consider go to the E-Verify site, get yourself set up on the E-Verify site, and start that process, in February or March. If you're hiring remote, you need to examine the documents in a live video meeting. It can be like my laptop camera or my phone camera. You also need to capture and retain copies of the documents. So it's a screenshot, or they're sending over good resolution copies of the documents. And that in the past, that hasn't been a requirement. Now, my advice has always been, if you are going to take a photocopy of the driver's license or the passport or driver's license and social security card, if you're taking photocopies of those, then you should take photocopies for all your employees. Or you've got a note to file in HR saying, okay, we started this process on July 1st of 2023, and this is how we do it. Because you can get in trouble in an audit if you're not consistent. Okay, they audit your files, and for 95% of your people, you have a copy of their driver's license and their social security card. For the other 2, 3, 4, 5%, you lost them. They're gone. Somebody didn't take them. You missed that step, and now you're kind of out of compliance because you're not treating everybody the same. But this is new. This piece is new. It says if you do remote hiring, you have to have those copies. So my advice has changed over the years, and my new advice for everybody is do E-Verify and have copies of the documents as you do that process. So it's a little trickier today.
A question on it, when we have that separate file for the I-9 forms, should we also keep copies of the whatever documents they use to verify who they are with that I-9 form, and also the E-Verify?
That's a good question. So in an audit, they would be looking for that. So especially if I were doing remote hiring, I would include the copies of those documents and the E-Verify documentation in my I-9 folders. If I did every hire live, and I had somebody from my HR team looking at every employee and every document, well, I'm not bound by those federal laws. I don't have to have copies, and I don't have to do E-Verify. There's no penalty for me not doing E-Verify. So I might dig my heels in, and there's still some choice there. There's not a penalty for me not doing E-Verify unless I do remote hiring. So it's a little tricky. It depends on the philosophy of your company and what you want to do and how you want to verify these. But it could very well be coming this year that there will be penalties for not using E-Verify. Yes, Leslie, do you have a question?
I'm kind of slow, but I guess I don't fully understand.
No, I'm going fast. There's like 10 different, I'm juggling 10 different balls here.
No, I'm slow as far as the E-Verify process. I don't
Oh.
understand exactly is that a requirement? Is it not? Is it just recommended? And what does it do exactly? I wear multiple hats, so like
Yep.
HR is
I
not
get
my
it.
main.
I get it. I get it. It's like having speed limit signs on the freeway, and
Mhm.
no police or no one will ever monitor you can drive down this 10 miles of freeway. You should not go over 80 miles an hour, but we're never going to patrol it. There's never going to be a ticket given, and there's never going to be a problem there. That's kind of where it's at. So the federal government is saying, yeah, we want every organization to use E-Verify, but there's no penalties for it.
Oh,
That's
okay.
where we sit right now.
Okay, so we should move in that direction.
I think you probably should.
Do most, I mean, we're moving to our electronic onboarding. We're with Paychecks. Do most of these platforms automatically do an E-Verify? I guess that's a question for them, but.
I think they'll have an ability to upload your E-Verify information and have it be held on the platform. It depends on the platform though. Who is using E-Verify? Chalice? Tell us about that process. You do it on day one, right?
Yes, it's part of our onboarding process. And then in our HRIS system, it's all seamless. So once we put in the informational I-9 verification, but we do have the physical forms as well too. We'll enter it electronically. And then from our HRIS system, you click on a link, you go straight to E-Verify's website, get your information there, and then we print off that confirmation sheet, attach it to the physical I-9 form with the proof of identification copies as well too.
Perfect. Now you do that in that process. What does it look like when E-Verify kicks it out and says there's a problem? How does it flag that?
It's honestly really quick. And you see it the most with a passport verification. Those always come back because they want to verify the picture that was in the passport matches what they have in their database.
Yeah.
So far in my short time in human resources, I haven't had one rejected for any other reason.
Okay.
But E-Verify is pretty user friendly. I would assume it'd be a bright, bold red, unverified message. But so far, I've only had it come back when I have a passport as my ID.
Gotcha.
So I was under the impression that we don't have to keep copies of the driver's license, social security, those documents anymore.
I was under that impression too. And actually 5 years ago, I would have given that advice. But more and more, like you, Leslie, you've got the corporate office, and then Steve is hiring somebody up. It's not Twin Falls. What's that town?
Jerome.
He's in Jerome, Idaho, and Steve probably isn't the guy to look at the ID, and it's probably better if you do that at the corporate office. But the remote hiring process says you cannot do that unless you're using E-Verify coupled with it. It'll kick it out on an audit. They'll say, well, you did a remote hire. Leslie, you didn't touch the driver's license or the social security card. Yeah, you looked at them through video, but that process demands that you also do the E-Verify process. So they're kind of turning up the screws at the federal level. So there could be a fine if you did a remote hire, hired somebody in Jerome, and you looked at that ID through a video, through a camera. You have to do E-Verify, or it's a violation.
Well, we have our office managers on site that do the I-9s for each new hire. So they're visually seeing it, and then they're the ones verifying in our software program that they verified the I-9s.
Okay. Then you're okay. If you've got managers at each site who are trained on the I-9 process, you're okay, and there's no exposure there for an E-Verify fine. There's just not exposure there yet because the on-site manager, Steve and Jerome, looked at that, and Steve's going to sign on the I-9 form.
So we don't have to do E-Verify if we have on-site verification, or we
Yet.
do?
Yet. You don't have to do it yet.
Okay.
Um,
And so should
it's-
I
Now, the state of
request?
Idaho, the state of Idaho probably says there might be somebody somewhere in the state of Idaho's documents to say every employer needs to be doing E-Verify.
Okay,
But it's back to my compliance issue is there any risk? Is there any dollar risk? Right now, no. By the end of 2025, there could very well be.
and so should we be going back to hard copies of these driver's license and social security cards?
If you move to remote hiring or if they change the federal law, then
So
yes.
only if it's remote hiring is that required at this point?
But you've got that covered with your general managers taking care of that in each location. Great questions, Leslie. Yeah, and there's a lot of gaps in this.
Question.
Yes.
So we're talking about, you know, the future and now and all of that, but when you're going through and you're doing a self-audit and Tommy or whoever you were talking about before didn't do what he was supposed to do, you have to get him done in 3 days, then it's the past. So how do you change that?
You have to call Tommy. No, I'm kidding.
Definitely me, I'm sure.
Angie, we'll talk about this because we've got steps for that. Good question.
Okay, sounds good.
So yeah, if you haven't done a self-audit in the past 5 years, think about that, about doing that. Federal audits, this is prior to the new administration. Federal audits increased over 400% in the past 8 years. So those are increasing. Each year they're adding increases or penalties per form. And these are actually 2024 numbers, but you could be penalized up to $2,507 per form, especially if you're missing forms and those people are working out there. So that's why you want to do those audits. It's low hanging fruit, 250 employees, 250 I-9 forms, and you move forward that way. You've heard me mention this, notice of inspection. This is if they're coming to your place of business and they're going to do an audit. They're going to start a desk audit. It might be a live audit in your office, or most likely these days it's done electronically, and they will have access, or you'll share access to those forms, working with your IT team to make sure it's all done without any risk. It's enforced by I.C.E. and Department of Homeland Security. 3-day window, like you guys said. Ask for time. I didn't know this until a couple years ago. I had a client and they received this NOI and they wanted to start the audit within 1 week. And the director of HR sent a quick message back and said, I'm on vacation next week. Can we delay the start of this audit? And the federal auditor turned right around and said, oh, I've got vacation this month too. How about we start 1 month from today? And they were able to push back their audit a month. So go for it. If your I-9 forms have not been audited recently and you get this notice of inspection, respond to them quickly, respond to their emails, and ask for more time. With the pre-dawn enforcement raids, what we're seeing all this month and all this happening, there is no notice. You can't say time out. I didn't get my notice of inspection. They will shut you down and they're going to take over. And yeah, like I said before, we are not required to be documents experts, but it kind of feels that way in the process. So we're going to go through some things as we look a little deeper about document validity. So yeah, I know there was a lot. We have a couple more slides on I-9s. I know there's a lot there, a lot to unpack. Remember, I'll send you the link to that first 50 minutes of looking at the I-9s. I covered a lot. There's a lot to wrap your head around, but we'll have the recorded version for you as well. Some other rules about the I-9 forms deal with storing and keeping those I-9 forms over time. Remember, like Anna has 250 employees, and one of those employees has been there for 22 years, and the I-9 form was done in 2003. Well, you have to hold on to that original I-9 form as long as the employee is employed. So you have to maintain that, even though it was 10 versions ago and it was a different I-9 form back then, you hang on to that form. So never destroy an active I-9 form. Now, for people who no longer work with you, there are different rules. And it's kind of weird. It's federal government. The retention rules are this, that for every I-9 form, you have to maintain that I-9 form for a period of 3 years. Okay. And there's an added rule that you have to keep that I-9 form for 1 year following the date of termination of employment. So there's actually 3 rules. If they're an active employee, you keep it forever. So if otherwise, you keep it for 3 years. So if somebody worked for you and they worked for you for 9 months, and they started 9 months ago, it was June of 2024. They started for you. They have to follow. They left you after 9 months, but you have to keep that I-9 form for 3 years. So you have to keep it till June of 2027. It has to satisfy that 3-year rule, even though that person's no longer with you. The other one is the 1-year rule, that you have to keep that form. Now, they were with you 9 months, they left. The other rule is you have to keep it for at least 1 year following the date of termination. So they were hired in June of 2024. They worked 9 months. By June of 2025, it'll be, no, let's say they left in January. They left right now. But you cannot get rid of that form in January 2026 because it hasn't satisfied the 3-year rule. Okay. So again, if somebody works for you for 1.5 years, they've been here 18 months, and you have to keep that until they reach a full 3 years. But the 1-year rule impacts people who have been with us for a long time too. If they've been with us 8 years and they leave, they just left a week ago in January, you have to keep that form until January of 2026. That's the 1-year component. The 1 year is the date of separation. Okay. So let's go one more time with that 9-month person. They worked for us 9 months. They left in January of this year, but they were hired in June of 2024. Well, we could hold that I-9 form for 1 year till next January, but that hasn't satisfied the 3-year rule. So the 3-year rule is driven by date of hire. The 1-year rule is driven by date of separation. So in 2027, when we reach the 3 years on that person that was hired in June of 24, they have met, number one, they've met the 3-year rule. And because they left in 2025 in January, they've met the 1-year rule. So we would no longer have to hold on to that I-9 form. That means you can look at your files, and there are some, I'm sure there are I-9 forms in there that don't need to be in there. For instance, for anybody who was hired, let's go back 3 full years, anybody who was, terminated, if anybody was terminated, let me go back 4 years, if they were terminated before January of 2021, they would satisfy both these rules. So if you've got any termed I-9 forms that are prior to 2021, you can purge them from your system. If you have electronic files, you can take those I-9 forms and just move them into an archive folder or something like that. If you're with ADP or Rippling or things like that, for all those old ones, as they stack up, they'll be moved automatically into a termed file. Any questions? Again, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with this slide. What are your thoughts, Leslie?
In our business, we have a lot of part-time employees that will work during a busy season, and then they'll be terminated, and then they'll come back again for the terminated season. So would we just pull their I-9 from the inactive folder and use the same one that they originally filled out when they
There are some rehire rules and what we can use on those I-9s. And hold on one second. I don't think I have this on my slide. So it says this: you must complete a new I-9 form when a new hire takes place. We know that. Unless you are rehiring an employee within 3 years of the date when the employee's previous I-9 was completed. However, in certain situations, a hire is not considered to have taken place despite an interruption in employment. So it sounds like you use these people year after year.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
They're just so random, and if they decide they need more money, they'll come back and work
Yeah.
again for a few months, and then they'll get bored and they'll move on, and then it's just, there's no
Yeah.
rhyme or reason to it.
I would look at that 3-year rule, and if it's inside the 3 years, you use the original one. But then
Okay.
if it's beyond 3 years and there's a lapse of service of 3 months or more, 90 days or more, then we're beyond 3 years from that original hire date and the original I-9 form, and I would have them fill out a new one.
Okay.
Great question. Okay. A couple quick slides on completing the form. Here's some common I-9 mistakes that we see. Recording information in the wrong section. So there's a column A for documents, column B, and column C. Remember, column A are documents that satisfy both things. That's why the passport is in column A. It satisfies your identity and your right to work in the U.S. If you're not using a passport, let's say you're using a driver's license and a social security card, well, then those forms would correspond to the columns of the driver's license proves your identity, and the social security card proves your right to work in the U.S. So putting things in the wrong column can be a problem. Missing information on the forms, missing a signature, missing any data on the form. There's lots of boxes, 10, 15, 18 boxes on the I-9 form. Every box has to be completed. If it doesn't apply, the Homeland Security, they like you to put NA in there. And if it's electronic, a lot of times it will produce and put not applicable in there. Accepting documents that are not on the I-9 list. So that's a separate form. You can just Google that acceptable documents, and there's a form there that shows the documents that are allowed. I think it might be in your participant guide as well. This is failing to sign and date the certification process. So this is our job as HR representatives. We have to sign and date that part of the certification. Also, failure to have the employee sign and date the form. And number 6, this one was news to me, that we should not be accepting a PO box for the employee's address. It should be a street address. So that's a new one. And take a look at this. This is we see social security cards a lot in the process. Some things that kind of can help you prove that it's a valid social security card. Now this one, I've cut off the top of it. The social security card comes in a 2-part, and you bend it back and forth, and it's perforated, and you tear it off. So a legit social security card will usually have a perforation along the top. It's one of the 5 or 6 security features on the form. Number 2 is in the social security, in the number, when it's printed on the form, there are these very bold, the dashes there, you can see 292 big fat dash 63-8844. Those dashes are bolder and thicker. So a normal computer and a font, if someone was typing it in and trying to create it on a computer, if it's a tiny little thin dash, it's a good indication that that's not a legitimate form. Also, where it says on here, Angela Chambers, that font is called a sans serif font, meaning there's no footers and no headers. You look up top, you see the Social Security. Look at the letter T in Social Security. It's got headers that come across, and it's got footer on the bottom of the T. In the body of this document, where it says the employee's name, there will be no headers and footers. It's just that sans serif font, and it's all capitals. Now you'll get individuals that have 5 names, 6 names, and they're all stacked it takes 2 lines to do all the, that's, that if it goes to a second line on the names, it will be centered. The top line and it'll all be centered. If you get a name that's justified left or pushed to the right, no, the computer program at the Social Security will center that name every time. So it should be centered. And 2 more for you. The Social Security font at the top where you see those words, the letters I-A-L are connected. The I is connected to the A is connected to the L. And then URI in the word security, the U and R are connected at the top. They're one piece. And the R and the I are connected at the bottom. And then the final security component where you see the word signature. Above that, it looks like a line where you sign. It's not a line. I think it's Department of Homeland Security or Social Security Administration repeated in like a 3-point font. If you had a magnifying glass and looked at it, it would be words, not a line. So another security feature. And every Social Security card must be signed. If it's not signed, it's not valid. Now, I've had employees say, I've said, hey, this isn't signed, and they turn around and they sign it, and then it's signed. So some interesting things on that. Making corrections. If you have hard copy forms, and these are the ones where you would usually make a correction, there's some rules that they have in making these corrections. Use a strike through. You can't use whiteout or any correction material. You could see how it's done at the bottom here. 1 line through the Social Security number. The new number is written in there, and then it's the date. You'll see month, day, year, and then initials. That's how you do it. You line through it, put the new number, date, and your initials. That's all you need. So your mission in the next week, part of our homework this week is search and destroy. Do you have any I-9 forms out there that are from 2021 or 2020 and they left your company in 2012, 13 through 2021? You don't need those in your files. And Tom, your old HR manager who messed half of those up, those people don't work for you anymore, and they've been gone for 4 or more years. So you can get rid of those. You can destroy them. If they're electronic, you can move them and put them in an archived folder. I will send out some documents today that help you with this I-9 audit. One is a document, it's a letter document that says, okay, and you don't need to start this week. Please don't. Wait till you have some time. And maybe you start the I-9 audit on March 1st or April Fool's Day. That would be interesting. But this letter is an overview letter of, hey, we did this. I run HR. I'm Joe Tate. We did this audit from April 1st through May 15th. And number 2 is just a spreadsheet. So it's an Excel spreadsheet of how you would lay this out, because you will find errors in the documents, and you can map it all out to a spreadsheet. It's easy to do. You can have notes in the spreadsheet that, yeah, any findings in the audit. We found documents of employees. We found 42 documents of employees who had left the company more than 4 years ago, putting them outside of the window, and we put those in an archived folder. Here's a note that you could put in as you're fixing things. A Social Security card was entered on the I-9 form, but column B was left blank. You're not going to write this on the I-9 form. This is kept in the spreadsheet that tells you what you did. On the I-9 form, you would, if that employee was still active, you would go back out and say, hey, we never got your driver's license on the I-9 form. I would enter the driver's license information, and then I would put my initials and the date. And you'll see on the I-9 form, well, the hire date on this was back in 2021. We hired them 4 years ago. But you could see that it was 2025 when we added the information, because unfortunately on that I-9 form, it was left blank. Well, this is common. Tom was the HR manager, and he did all these hires 5-10 years ago, and he never completed the HR section, or he completed the HR section and never signed it. So I can go back and look at that, and I'm going to put my signature in there, today's date, and this will tie back into the spreadsheet to see what we did. What do you do if no I-9 form exists? What are your thoughts? Chalice, what do you do? It's coming to you, and there's no I-9 form. This is common with especially small companies, because you had the founder and 2 other people founded the company. They didn't know about I-9 forms. So you've gone on, now you've got 100 employees, and you've got 97 I-9 forms, but you don't have one for the president and the CEO and one of the other founders.
I honestly don't know the answer, but I would assume you needed to get one filled out ASAP.
Yeah, that's what I would do, is I would fill it out. I would still put in their hire date of when they founded the company. And yeah, that was 10 years ago, but we put in the hire date and their name and fill it out. So the hire date is here, and the date that the form was filled out is there. It's clearly that this didn't happen on the date of hire. And you could put a note on there that I would put my initials and maybe a note that says no I-9 form. And then it's got the created date, and I would track it in my spreadsheet. So yeah, you're spot on. Okay, so I'll send you that letter, that Excel sheet, and then what I have is just an overview, and it's that overview is just kind of a roadmap to do your own I-9 form audit, your self-audit. So gear up for this. Again, don't start this immediately, but have it on your to-do list by maybe the end of Q2. And so we'll be in a good place and we'll be safe there, because it's going to take some time. Like Anna, you have 250 I-9 forms out there. But if someone is still working for you, you could call them in and say, hey, we just didn't get your driver's license on this. Just need to see your driver's license. If they no longer work for you, then you're going to have to put it in your archives folder. And it's got that mistake. Tom, the HR guy, messed up. He didn't ask for a Social Security card, and it's blank on there. That's a violation. It could pose, and this person left you in 2023, but Tom never filled out that information. So it's legacy. As soon as they reach the point that we can purge that document from the folder. So I have kind of a monthly reminder in my calendar that says, okay, which employees have left a year ago, and can we purge their I-9 form?
Question.
Yes.
I was going through some of the I-9s. They have not had anybody sign them.
You mean HR person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like nobody signs most of the time, the ones I've seen the employees signed, but nobody else.
Yeah, if it's not signed by HR, it'll fall on you now, Anna, and that's fine. There's not a personal financial risk to that. You sign it, date it, and you could put your initials and then put I-9 audit.
Okay.
Just a little quick. So you're verifying
Okay.
that, yeah, this person was hired 4 years ago, but I'm auditing it now. And
Okay.
actually, the federal government likes to see that. They like to see that proactive approach. So you can handle it and keep it in your files.